My sister planned her baby shower on my wedding day to ruin it, but when nobody showed up and the entire family chose me, her husband discovered her lies and now she's divorced, alone and blaming me for destroying her perfect life. I'm 25 years old. I work as an animator for a pretty well-known video game company, and until about 6 months ago, I was living in what I considered relative peace. You know, far away from my family and their endless drama. But it turns out my wedding, which was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, ended up being the moment when all the accumulated resentment from literally decades finally exploded. And when I say decades, I mean my entire damn life. Because this story starts from as far back as I can remember, when my older sister Sabrina was the perfect child, and I was, basically, the one who got in the way. I don't remember a single moment from my childhood when my parents looked at me the same way they looked at Sabrina. She was 5 years older than me, and from the moment I was born, I was like her defective shadow. You know what I mean? Everything Sabrina did was incredible, worthy of celebration, of photos, of excited phone calls to the grandparents. When Sabrina got good grades, my parents would take her to dinner at her favorite restaurant and organize like a mini celebration. When I got the same grades, or even better ones sometimes, my mom would say something like, "Oh, that's nice, honey," and continue with whatever she was doing. Literally that disinterested. I remember when Sabrina was like 15 years old, she started playing piano, and my parents bought an expensive piano, hired the best teacher in town, and every time we had visitors, they'd force Sabrina to play so everyone would applaud her. I was 10 years old and I liked to draw. I'd spend hours drawing in my room, and once I showed my dad a drawing I was super proud of. I'd spent days on it. He barely looked at it, said something like it's nice, and went back to watching the football game on TV. He didn't even ask what I had drawn. But with Sabrina, it was different. It was always different. And things didn't improve as we grew up. On the contrary, they got worse. Sabrina went to college. They paid for everything, obviously, studied something business-related that honestly I never really understood. And even though her grades were mediocre, my parents acted like she'd won a Nobel Prize every time she passed an exam. I decided to study digital animation, got a full scholarship because my grades were excellent. And you know what my dad said when I told him? That the whole cartoon thing wasn't a real career and that he hoped I wasn't wasting my life. He literally said it like that, wasting my life. As if my years of effort weren't worth anything because it wasn't what he considered successful. After graduating, I moved to another city, like 3 hours away from where they lived, and basically cut contact. It wasn't a dramatic decision like, I hate you and never want to see you again. It was more that I stopped calling as much, stopped visiting them every holiday. I started making excuses when they invited me to family gatherings. The truth is, every time I was with them, I felt invisible, or worse, they felt me like a reminder of what Sabrina wasn't. Because by then, Sabrina had already married Preston, a guy who worked in finance and made good money, and my parents wouldn't stop talking about how perfect everything was, how proud they were, how Sabrina had found the ideal man. I met Maxwell about a year after moving. He worked as a software engineer and we met at a super boring tech conference where we were both trying to sneak away to get coffee instead of listening to the presentations. We became friends first, went out as friends for months, and eventually we realized we were in love. Sounds like a cheesy movie. I know. But it was genuine and calm, without drama, which was exactly what I needed after all the toxicity from my family. For like 3 years, I maintained that distance from my parents. I'd visit them maybe twice a year, at Christmas and on my mom's birthday, and the visits lasted a day at most. Maxwell never went with me because, honestly, I didn't want him to meet that part of my life. Sabrina by then already had 2 kids, and every time I arrived at my parents' house, it was like entering a shrine dedicated to her and her children. Photos everywhere, the kids' drawings on the refrigerator, toys in every corner. Of my achievements, my work, my life, there was no trace. 0 photos of me, nothing. My Aunt Rachel, my mom's younger sister, was like the only person in the family who saw what was happening and called it by its name. She never had kids and was always like my only ally at those horrible family gatherings. I remember once, at a Christmas dinner, my dad spent like half an hour talking about how Sabrina had been promoted at her job, which was basically an administrative position at her father-in-law's company, but whatever. And when he finished his monologue, Aunt Rachel asked him if he knew I had just worked on the animation for a video game that had won several awards. My dad looked at me surprised, as if he'd just realized I was there, and said, "Oh yeah, that's good. and went back to talking about Sabrina. Aunt Rachel looked at me with that face like, I'm so sorry, and I just shrugged because I was already used to it. Things changed, or at least temporarily, when my mom had a serious health problem. It was like 2 years ago. She was 52, I think, and they found a tumor in her pancreas. It turned out to be benign after several scary tests and surgery. But during those weeks of uncertainty, something happened in me, and I decided I didn't want to carry the weight of having distanced myself if something happened to her. So I came back, not physically, because I still lived 3 hours away, but I started calling more, asking how she was, visiting a bit more often. During her recovery, my mom had like a moment of clarity, or at least that's what I thought at the time. She told me she regretted having been so hard on me, that maybe she hadn't been fair, that she wanted things to be different between us. I wanted to believe she was sincere, you know? I wanted to believe she finally saw me, that she understood the damage she'd caused over so many years. So I decided to give her a chance, lower my defenses a bit, try to have a closer relationship. It was during that period of relative peace that Maxwell proposed to me. It was perfect. Nothing ostentatious, just the two of us in a cabin in the mountains during a weekend. When I told my parents, they were happy, or at least they seemed to be. My mom cried a little and said she was happy for me. Even my dad seemed genuinely excited. For the first time in my life, I felt that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. We started planning the wedding immediately. We wanted something relatively small, like 80 people, in a nice place but not excessively expensive. We chose the date almost 8 months in advance, a Saturday in October that seemed perfect because the weather wouldn't be too cold or too hot. We sent the digital, saved the dates like 6 months ahead, the formal invitations 3 months ahead. Basically, we did everything according to protocol, so people could plan with time. Sabrina seemed happy for me, or so I thought. She'd send me messages asking about the plans, offering to help with things, acting like the caring older sister she'd never really been. I wanted to believe things had changed, that maybe the experience of almost losing our mom had brought us together somehow. How naive I was. Seriously. 2 months before the wedding, Sabrina announced she was pregnant with her 4th child. Everyone was super excited. Obviously, my parents wouldn't stop talking about it, about how they were going to be grandparents again, how blessed they were. I was happy for her. Genuinely, I was. Because despite everything, I've never wished bad things on my sister. The problem wasn't her having kids. The problem was how my parents reacted to everything she did. What I didn't know until much later is that Sabrina, basically 2 weeks after announcing her pregnancy, started planning a baby shower. And not a normal baby shower on any date, no. She specifically chose the same day and same time as my wedding. The same damn date we'd announced 8 months in advance, that was on the invitations the whole family had received, that everyone knew about. I found out, through my cousin Lena, Aunt Rachel's daughter, like 2 weeks before the wedding. She sent me a message like, "Hey, did you already know about Sabrina's baby shower?" And I was like, "What baby shower?" And she sent me a screenshot of the digital invitation Sabrina had sent to the whole family. The date, the time, everything matched exactly with my wedding. Even the place was like 20 minutes from the venue where Maxwell and I were getting married. I couldn't believe it. I literally stayed staring at my phone screen, unable to process what I was seeing. Maxwell was with me when I saw it, and he got furious immediately. Started saying how, was this possible? Who does something like that? That it was clearly intentional. I still wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. I was thinking like, maybe it's a mistake. Maybe she didn't realize. Although deep down I knew it was impossible she hadn't realized. I sent Sabrina a message, tried to be as calm as possible, told her something like, "Hey sis, I saw your baby shower is the same day as my wedding. Was it a mistake or can we change the date of one of the two events?" She responded like 3 hours later, super casual, saying no, that she'd already reserved the place and sent the invitations. That anyway, my wedding was in the afternoon and her baby shower was from noon so people could go to both. Noon until 4 in the afternoon, her invitation said, and my wedding was at 3. Mathematically impossible for someone to go to both. I called my mom, thinking she would support me, that she'd see how ridiculous the situation was. She told me not to make drama, that Sabrina was pregnant and couldn't be stressed, that it was just a baby shower and surely people would find a way to go to both events. I explained it was literally impossible, that the hours overlapped, that clearly Sabrina had done this on purpose. My mom sighed as if I was exaggerating and told me not to be selfish, that I'd already had my moment when I got engaged, and now it was Sabrina's turn to celebrate her pregnancy. That's when something inside me broke definitively. After all those years of trying, of hoping things would change, of giving them chances, it was still the same story. Sabrina always first. Me, always after. Maxwell and I decided to take matters into our own hands. He contacted all our guests, like 80 people, and sent them a super polite but clear message explaining the situation. Basically, it said we'd noticed there was a date conflict with another family event, that our wedding had been planned and announced first, and that we hoped to count on their presence but would understand if they decided to go to the other event. We asked them to please confirm their definite attendance so we could make final adjustments with the catering and the venue. The responses we received were revealing. Truth be told, some relatives from my dad's side were honest and said they'd go to Sabrina's baby shower because, basically, that's what was expected of them. Others, especially Aunt Rachel and several cousins from my maternal side, were furious with Sabrina and confirmed they'd definitely come to my wedding. Maxwell's and my friends, obviously, were with us. In the end, of the 80 guests, like 65 confirmed they'd come to the wedding. Not bad, considering everything. The days before the wedding were a mix of excitement and anxiety. I tried to focus on the positive, on that I was going to marry the love of my life, on that we'd have a beautiful day surrounded by people who really loved us. But I couldn't help feeling that pang of pain every time I thought about my parents choosing Sabrina's baby shower over my wedding. My mom called me once to tell me she would come to the wedding, not to worry, but that my dad had decided to go to the baby shower because Sabrina needed him there. She didn't even try to convince him to come. The wedding day arrived, and, I'm not going to lie, the morning was beautiful. I got ready with my friends. My cousin Lena was there. Aunt Rachel helped me with the dress. Zara, my best friend since college and my maid of honor, made sure everything was perfect. When I saw myself in the mirror with the dress on, for the first time in a long time I felt completely happy, without the weight of my family's expectations, without Sabrina's shadow. It was my day, and it was perfect. The ceremony was exactly as Maxwell and I had dreamed. We got married in a beautiful garden. There were flowers everywhere. The weather was perfect. My mom was there, crying in the front row, and although my dad wasn't there, I tried not to think about it. Aunt Rachel gave me her arm to walk toward the altar, and that meant more to me than I can explain. Maxwell was waiting for me with that huge smile and shiny eyes, and when we said our vows, I felt that everything had been worth it. The reception started super well. The food was delicious. The DJ was playing good music. People were dancing and having fun. I was in my element, dancing with Maxwell, taking pictures with everyone, enjoying every second. Like 2 hours of party had passed when I saw Zara approaching me with a face that said, "Problems, big problems." Turns out Sabrina had arrived at the venue. She and my dad had shown up, without invitation, without warning, nothing. And Sabrina wasn't exactly coming in a festive attitude. Zara told me she was at the entrance demanding to come in, that she was yelling she was the bride's sister and had a right to be there. The venue's security staff wasn't letting her pass because her name wasn't on the guest list and, honestly, because she was making a scene. I went toward the entrance with Maxwell and Zara, and the spectacle I saw was surreal. Sabrina was red in the face, had clearly been crying, and my dad was trying to calm her down but without much success. When she saw me, Sabrina exploded. She started yelling at me how dare I steal her day, that she was pregnant and I was selfish for having my wedding the same day as her baby shower, that I was trying to ruin her life. The irony was so obvious I almost laughed. Seriously. I told her, staying as calm as possible, that my wedding had been planned and announced first, that she knew perfectly well the date for months, and that she had been the one who scheduled her baby shower intentionally for the same day. Sabrina denied everything, said she had sent her baby shower invitations first. Blatant lie. My wedding invitations had gone out months before, and that I was jealous of her like I'd always been. My dad, instead of shutting her up or admitting the obvious, I started saying I should let Sabrina in because she was my sister. That family came first, that this was ridiculous. And that's when something in me just got tired of everything. I told my dad he had chosen not to come to my ceremony, that he had chosen Sabrina's baby shower over his other daughter's wedding, and that now he had no right to demand anything. That if Sabrina mattered so much to him, they should go back together to her baby shower and let me enjoy my day. Sabrina started crying harder, saying nobody had gone to her baby shower, that everyone had preferred to come to my stupid wedding, that I had stolen her family. And there was the involuntary confession, right? She had planned the baby shower on the same day, specifically hoping the family would choose her event over mine, like they'd always done our whole lives. But this time it didn't work. People chose to come to my wedding, and she couldn't stand it. Zara, who's super protective of me, told Sabrina to leave, that this was private property, and if she didn't leave, they were going to call the police. My dad got indignant, said how dare we threaten them. Maxwell, who until that moment had been quiet, told my dad he was a disgrace as a father, that he'd failed his daughter her entire life, and that if he had a bit of dignity, he'd take Sabrina out of there before completely ruining the day. Eventually they left, Sabrina still crying and yelling incoherent things about how unfair I was. The security staff made sure they left the property. I went back to the reception trying to compose myself, but honestly the moment was kind of ruined already. My guests, bless them, tried to act like nothing had happened. The music continued, people danced. Aunt Rachel hugged me tight and told me she was proud of me for standing firm. The rest of the night was better. I managed to relax a bit, danced with Maxwell, our first dance as husband and wife. We cut the cake, did all the traditional stuff. My mom came over to say goodbye before leaving and told me she was sorry, that she didn't know Sabrina was going to do that. I didn't say anything to her, just nodded. Because what could I say? She hadn't defended me when I needed it most either. Maxwell and I went on our honeymoon to Costa Rica for 2 weeks, and honestly, it was exactly what I needed to disconnect from all the drama. I turned off my phone most of the time, only turned it on to upload some photo to social media or send messages to Aunt Rachel. When I finally came back and turned on my phone normally, I had like 200 messages, most from Sabrina and my mom. Sabrina's messages were a mix of manipulative apologies and accusations. She said she was sorry, but that I had forced her to act that way by being so selfish, that I'd always been jealous of her, that I was the reason her baby shower had been a failure. My mom's messages basically asked me to forgive Sabrina, that she was going through a difficult time with the pregnancy, that I should be the more mature one and take the first step. I responded to both, separately. I told my mom I was tired of always being the one who had to be understanding, the one who had to forgive, the one who had to take the first step, and that for 25 years I'd been the invisible daughter, and it was enough already, that I wasn't going to keep accepting that treatment just because Sabrina was the favorite, that if she wanted to have a relationship with me, she had to start by acknowledging the damage she'd caused me my entire life and defending me even once. I told her until that happened, we were back to low contact. I sent Sabrina a shorter message. I told her what she'd done was unforgivable, that she'd deliberately tried to ruin my wedding, and that I didn't want to know anything about her until she could give a real apology without conditions or excuses. I didn't really expect that to happen, but I needed to tell her. Like a week after coming back, Preston, Sabrina's husband, showed up at my apartment. Maxwell and I were surprised when we opened the door and saw him there. He looked terrible, honestly, like he hadn't slept in days. He asked to talk and, although we were wary, we let him in. What Preston told us was revealing and, at the same time, wasn't surprising at all. Turns out Sabrina had lied to him too. She told him I knew about the baby shower and was okay with it, that we'd coordinated so they'd be on the same day because that way the family could celebrate both things. Preston had no idea I wasn't officially invited to my own rival family event, or that Sabrina had planned everything intentionally to boycott my wedding. When Preston saw that almost nobody had gone to the baby shower, he asked what had happened, and Sabrina told him I had manipulated the family against me, that I was a professional victim always seeking attention. But after the scene at my wedding, Preston started investigating on his own, talked to some relatives, checked the dates of the invitations, and figured out the whole truth. Preston apologized to us for not having seen earlier what Sabrina was really like. He said during their marriage he'd noticed manipulative behaviors, but had always justified or ignored them, that after the wedding thing he couldn't keep doing it anymore. He told us he'd started the divorce process, that he no longer trusted Sabrina and didn't want his kids growing up thinking that type of behavior was normal or acceptable. I felt bad for Preston and for the kids. Truth be told, the kids weren't to blame for any of this, and Preston seemed genuinely devastated. I thanked him for coming to talk to us, for being honest, and told him I hoped he'd find a way to protect his kids from all this drama. After Preston left, I got more messages from Sabrina. This time she was furious, blamed me for her divorce, said I'd ruined her life, that because of me, her kids were going to grow up in a broken home. The irony that she couldn't see it had been her own behavior that had caused all this was almost comical. I blocked her number after that because I simply didn't have the energy to continue with that vicious circle. My mom called me several times after that, trying to get me to intervene with Preston, to talk to him so he wouldn't divorce Sabrina. I told her it wasn't my problem, that Preston's decisions were his and I had no intention of getting involved in their marriage. She got frustrated with me, told me I was being cruel, that Sabrina was pregnant and didn't deserve to go through this. I reminded her Sabrina had intentionally tried to ruin my wedding and that the consequences of her actions weren't my responsibility. It's been 6 months since the wedding. Maxwell and I are happy, living our life, focused on our jobs and building our future together. I maintain contact with Aunt Rachel, with Lena, and with some cousins who supported me through all this. My mom and I talk occasionally, brief and superficial conversations, but there isn't that closeness she wanted to rebuild because she simply can't or won't acknowledge her part in all this. Sabrina had her baby like 2 months ago. I found out through social media, not because anyone told me directly. I didn't send congratulations, didn't ask how she was, simply let her life continue on one side and mine on the other. Preston apparently has shared custody of the kids and is in the final stages of the divorce. Sabrina keeps blaming me for everything in her cryptic Facebook posts that, although I have her blocked, Lena tells me about sometimes. My dad and I haven't talked since the wedding. I don't even know if he's aware of the role he played in all this, or if he simply thinks I'm the problematic daughter who ruined the family peace. Honestly, I don't care about his opinion like I used to. I've learned you can't force people to see you if they don't want to. Sometimes I feel guilty, you know? I think about those kids growing up with divorced parents and I wonder if I could have handled things differently. But then I remember I didn't plan a sabotage event. I didn't lie. I didn't manipulate anyone. I just wanted to have my special day without drama, and it was Sabrina who decided that couldn't happen. The consequences of her actions are hers, not mine. Maxwell and I are thinking about having kids eventually, maybe in a couple of years. And when that happens, I've promised myself I'm going to be the type of mother who treats all her children equally, who sees all of them, who celebrates everyone's achievements without comparisons. Because I know what it feels like growing up feeling invisible, and I don't want any child of mine to go through that ever. Aunt Rachel told me a few weeks ago she's proud of me for establishing boundaries, for not letting them keep treating me the way they always treated me. She told me it took courage to do what I did. That many people can't free themselves from toxic family dynamics because the weight of guilt is too strong. And maybe she's right. I don't know. But what I do know is that for the first time in my life, I feel at peace with my decisions. The other day, Maxwell and I were looking at our wedding photos, the ones that finally arrived from the photographer, and in every photo you can see real happiness. Despite the drama, despite Sabrina's scene, despite everything, that day was beautiful because I was surrounded by people who genuinely loved and supported me, and that, in the end, is what matters.